My name is Jaak Rakfeldt. I was born in a community of Estonian refugees in Sweden. We came through England and Canada to the United States, where I've lived my whole life. I'm a professor, a researcher, and a psychotherapist. And here are my main points. Trauma, the horrific events endured by the refugees. Coping, hard work, flexibility, and adaptability to their new life circumstances. There are judges and professors and people who worked doing manual labor on farms like in Seabrook, New Jersey and everything. They did what they needed to do after they got here from the refugee camps. Resilience. They formed, even in the refugee camps, they formed organizations immediately which offered emotional and social support and created life meanings, purpose, and goals. And the major mission was, immediately, and has been for all these decades, the unwavering, tireless struggle for a free Estonia. Vankumattu, väsimattu võitlus vaba Eesti eest. These photos I got from David Triumf from Sweden. He was a 10-year-old boy on a ship, and he corresponded with my father. And here he says, that's Ilmar Rakfeldt, my father. This, he wrote on here, he says, this is my last photo of my father. During the rescue, his father, who was an accountant at the Apsalu Bank, slipped and fell between the ships and drowned. That's how we ended up with these. He didn't take the photos, someone else did, but he had them in his possession. In fact, August Giedla is the one who made the photos. My parents escaped from Norotsi in a small boat at the last possible time. In fact, smoke was rising from the city and from the harbor. On September 22nd, 1944, the wooden motorboat was named Ahti. It was packed with people. The inner bottom of the boat was covered with red clay. It had been hit by a shell and sunk to the bottom of the harbor. And it was pulled up and patched together hastily. I remember my mother describing it. She said, cigarette butts from the workmen and shavings from the wood shavings and things were left all over the place, scattered around. That's how quickly they put it together. My uncle Arnold and his family were on the boat, along with my mother Ilmar, and my father Ilmar, and my mother Emeralda, and my sisters Elle and Tia. My father, in Estonian, the word is Isa. An uncle, the word is Onu, struggled to get the engine running. Suddenly, Arnold's wife Hilda climbed up from the cabin to the boat's deck and told Arnold that they would never make it to Sweden on this boat, and that she was going back to shore and taking the children. She then added that she had recently seen a dream where Arnold was plowing in the fields and the walls of their house collapsed in on her and the children. And given the clay-stained boat and the patch together, she had every reason to have those feelings, I guess. She said, "We are not going out to the sea to drown." Then she looked at my father, Isa, and she asked, "What are you going to do?" Isa replied that at least if they go to sea, they have a chance to survive. But if they stayed in Estonia, the Russians would deport them to a slave labor camp or execute them. During the first Soviet occupation in 1941, they learned that they were on a list to be arrested and deported. But they managed to escape to the forest where they lived for several weeks hiding out. We do not want to go, but we cannot stay. Minna ei taha, kuid jäädä ei saa. This is the Ahti. They tied the suitcases to the boat's deck because it was so full of people. There was no room. They finally got the engine running, but the engines, the motors of the other two boats that were there, wouldn't start. And so they pulled a rope around the bow of the Ahti and hooked it to the two smaller boats and set off for Sweden, 200 miles away. Here they are leaving. Here you see the two boats behind being pulled. A strong storm left them stranded at sea for 4 days without food or fresh water. A tiny baby died. It was wrapped in a blanket and was passed from hand to hand, person to person, until it was finally pushed out through the cabin window, the portal, into the waves. A man jumped up and leaped overboard with the words, "The general is going for his morning swim." Another man had to be subdued and calmed down after he tried to end this horror by trying to shoot holes into the bottom of the boat to sink it. My mother, again Emma in Estonian, held my sisters, Tia and Helle. Tia was 1.5 years old. Helle was 1 year older. They bobbed endlessly in the waves, up and down, up and down, up and down. Suddenly, Emma felt that the boat had stopped and that it was resting on the bottom of the sea. She felt that finally their ordeal had ended. Peace came over her. She lost track of time. Finally, a Swedish ship saw them bobbing in the waves. Emma handed Tia and Helle to Isa. When the waves raised the Ahti to the height of the Swedish ship, this was a horrible storm. In fact, where they were rescued was the same place in 1994. The huge ship, the SS Estonia, went down and with loss of almost 1,000 people. That's how bad the late September storms are in the Baltic. And so they couldn't drop a rope or a ladder. They had to pull people up one by one by one. as the little boat was brought up to the level of the Swedish destroyer. So she handed Tia and Helle to Isa when the waves raised the Ahti up to the height of the Swedish boat ship, who then passed the girls on to others and finally to the Swedish sailors, who pulled them on board the Gavle. Suddenly my mother thought, and it flashed through her mind, was Helle wrapped tightly enough in her oversized coat? The image of Helle slipping out and falling into the waves between the ships terrified her. And I remember her many times telling me about that instant. 51 people, you saw the size of the boat, were saved one by one by one. The captain said it was a long ordeal as they were tossed in the winds and the waves. And they were finally on board the ship and taken safely to Sweden. We do not want to go, but we cannot stay. Minna ei taha, kuidjäädä ei saa. There's Helle being pulled aboard by the Swedish sailors. And this is how all 51 people were rescued. This is where they left from. This is Estonia, with its many islands, Saaremaa, Hiiumaa, Vormsi, and so forth. This is Finland, with its islands. This is Sweden. This is called Kurk, a straight, very narrow. I've been there myself. This is where they left from. 4 days later, this is where the Swedish ship rescued them. I got this point from the Swedish ship's log. And these islands here are Finnish islands. The captain said that the storm, the waves, and the wind took them out of international waters into Finnish waters during the rescue. This is the ship, the Gavle. Hilda and Arnold managed to get on a bigger ship named the Norrstern. This is a picture of the Norrstern. A Russian torpedo cut the ship in half and it sank in 90 seconds. Arnold was one of the few who survived. He was taken to Germany with a badly broken leg to a schoolhouse that had been converted into a temporary hospital. When Arnold was finally released from the hospital, he realized that he now found himself in a foreign, war-torn country whose language he did not speak. Bedbugs had dug a hole through his cast and had made a nest in his leg. He could hardly walk, and he was all alone. His wife, Hilda, his daughters, Milvi, Leili, and his son, Toivo, were at the bottom of the sea. Just as Hilda's dream had prophesied. The day was December 6th, on what would have been Toivo's 4th birthday. My parents survived their dangerous journey across the Baltic. I was born in Sweden. Our family stopped in London, England, on the way from Sweden to Canada. At 3.5 years of age, I became Onu Arnold's godson, as he wished, to replace his lost son Toivo somehow. After a year in Canada, we moved to the United States. My parents worked in a car factory. We all toiled long hours on our farm. Over time, our life became more comfortable, but the deep emotional scars remained. Late at night, I often heard Isa's footsteps in the hallway near my bedroom. Sleeplessness plagued him for years. Isa never fully recovered from the guilt he felt for having survived while death squads had killed so many of the others with whom they had hidden in the forest for many weeks. We do not want to go, but we cannot stay. Minna ei taha, kuid jäädä ei saa. Despite major trauma, most of my parents' generation was relatively happy and healthy. Hard work brought material well-being and comfort. And while they worked hard, they also knew how to party. And I remember these well as a kid. These gatherings were accompanied by music. They all played instruments. They sang, danced, laughed, ate, drank, sometimes till dawn. The significant factor that helped them to cope with and to endure their new environments was having quickly organized, formed groups, even while still in the refugee camps. They quickly formed organizations, groups and associations where they danced, sang, and made Estonian handicrafts. They also founded congregations, scout troops, Estonian schools, and more. Such organizations fostered a sense of belonging that gave new meaning, goals, and purpose to the mission of their lives, all of which strengthened their resilience. Belonging to these organizations helped them immensely to overcome their trauma. My good friend and longtime colleague at the Yale University School of Medicine, Dr. Stephen Southwick, studied resilience for years. He's listed key components, which are imitating resilient role models. Even as a young person, I remember we've all faced hard stuff in our lives. And I remember thinking back then, that my God, look what my parents, my uncle, and their generation went through. I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. Finding meaning and purpose in trauma. Cognitive flexibility, determination, courage, a sense of duty, forgiveness, love, a spiritual practice that strengthens one's moral compass, staying true to one's core values and identity, and strong relationships and social support networks. The primary goal of the Estonian diaspora organizations was to preserve the Estonian culture and language and heritage while brutal Russification was taking place in Estonia. I visited many times and I saw it myself in the 70s and it changed my life. I said, I have to do something. They were trying to Russify us out of existence, basically. The most important mission was our unwavering, tireless struggle for a free Estonia. Vankumattu, väsimattu võitlus vaba Eesti eest. Once I protested as part of this whole effort at the United Nations headquarters in New York City. Here I am. I held a toy piglet with a rubber Gorbachev head, and I carried it in a mesh bag attached to a long pole. And when I saw the motorcade coming, I held the mesh bag up and out over the street so that Gorbachev could see it as he drove slowly by in his black limousine. After regaining independence, we actively lobbied for Estonia to become a member of NATO. And perhaps it's NATO membership now that saves Estonia from Ukraine's fate. A politically active global Estonian community is essential for maintaining Estonia's security. It deserves to be remembered, honored, celebrated, and respected. I strongly urge the members of Parliament to create a national day of remembrance for the 80,000 refugees who fled and for those who died, whose fate it was that they did not want to go, but they could not stay. Et ei tahtnud minna, kuid nad ei saanud jääda. Thank you for your attention.